Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this channel. One of the comments or requests was that I do a video on Caveat Emptor. So one of you wanted to know about Caveat Emptor, and yes, I'm responding to a request of one person because one person is as good as 1,000 people to me. If one person is learning, if one person's life is changed, for me that makes all the difference. So today I'm talking about Caveat Emptor, which means buyer beware. So what does caveat emptor mean? It really means that the buyer should beware. If you're going to buy land, go check on that land first before you pay. Do a search. If you're buying a car, do a vehicle search. Does it have any issues with police? Are there any parking tickets on it? Caveat emptor means the buyer has to get out of their way to do a search or to inquire. Here we are saying it's the principle that the buyer is responsible for checking the quality of the goods they're taking. So it is you to go and check. If you're buying a house, go to the land registry. Who's the owner? Talk to the neighbors. Talk to the people around. Talk to the LCs. In other words, the law says that the buyer must get out of their way to investigate. Otherwise, should there be any issue that you could have seen if you have done any search, you cannot wake up and say, oh, me, I didn't know this. You were lazy, you didn't do the search, you're supposed to be aware. So caveat emptor really says the buyer must get out of their way to search. If someone sells you something that is fake and you had the opportunity to do a search and you didn't, it is your problem. It is your responsibility. Go out and do the search. So caveat emptor is saying, buyer, you must be aware. Why? Because if there is a defect that you could have seen by a simple check, you cannot later blame the seller for giving you a bad product because you had the opportunity to check. The law requires you to check and you didn't check. So caveat emptor means the buyer should be aware. You should go out of your way and search. So in essence, caveat emptor is saying, it's a Latin phrase really, and like I've said, it says buyer beware. In other words, be aware of any defects that can be identified in any sale that is going to take place. It's a disclaimer for the seller. If you come back and bring the goods and say, oh, you sold me something wrong, the seller says you were supposed to have checked it. So it's a disclaimer for the seller. And it puts the burden, the due diligence of searching and checking the quality on the buyer. So the seller doesn't have the responsibility to give you all the information concerning the quality. You're supposed to look at the goods, inspect them, check them, do they meet the quality you want, and then you buy them. Should you buy them when they have a defect, you cannot come back and say, oh, the goods you gave me were wrong. No, you had the responsibility to search, to check and inspect and take what you have inspected. So it's a Latin phrase that says, be aware, wake up buyer, don't tosumagira, or go with your eyes wide open, and what you're buying, make sure you're buying the thing that you want to buy of good quality. So let us look at examples of caveat emptor or instances where the buyer should be aware. Here I have a scenario of Jane. Jane goes to the shop, a second-hand shop. She buys a bucket. She goes home. She finds the bucket is leaking. She cannot now go back and say, no, you gave me a bad bucket. No. The law says that she should have inspected it at the point of sale. So she should be aware of what she's taking. Or you buy a fridge from a garage or a yard sale. The seller is not required to guarantee that it will work as promised. You're taking it as it is, so you must inspect it. You must check it. Go with your electrician to test it while you're there. Because the buyer is supposed to be aware. The seller is not responsible for defects you could have seen or you would have noted when you did not inspect the product that you took. Now, there are exceptions to this doctrine of caveat emptor. It doesn't apply in a blanket way. In other words, it's not that all the time the seller has to beware, and if there's any damage, there's no way the seller will be responsible. So there are instances where the buyer can be able to blame the seller, and those are the exceptions you're going to look at. So in other words, the buyer can be able to shift responsibility of the defects to the seller, and one of the instances is one, if the buyer shares with the seller his purpose for the purchase. Like you've made known the purpose, the seller is under responsibility to provide goods that are fit for the purpose you've mentioned. Remember the doctrine of fit for purpose that we talked about? in the notes in the class? Yes, this is part of it. So if the seller is made known of the importance or the purpose someone wants something, they cannot rely on caveat emptor if there is a defect. The seller must sell something that is fit for purpose. Secondly, if the buyer relies on the knowledge of the or technical expertise of the seller, then the seller cannot wake up and say, oops, caveat emptor. Let's assume you go to buy a car to these Mercedes-Benz guys in Uganda. You don't know anything much about engines and all that. So you explain to the dealers, you say, this is what I want to buy. I want an engine that does this. You're going to rely on their knowledge, on their expertise to explain certain things to you and to sell to you a car that does what you're saying. So because of that, they cannot wake up and say that caveat emptor if the car doesn't work as you wanted it to work. Because you relied on their knowledge and expertise, they are held responsible. Also, if it's a business that the seller does and that is their business all the time, like exactly like that example of the Benz, that's what they do for a living. You rely on them, and the law says they cannot wake up and deny that caveat emptor, that they shouldn't compensate you, because that is a dealing they deal with every day. They're expected to be good at their craft. They're expected to know what they're talking about. So if it is the sale of goods or products that the seller is always dealing with, caveat emptor will not apply. So the other exception is if you're buying something and you're buying a brand name. You go to the shop and you say, I want Colgate. The law says that it is expected that the Colgate that is given you is of good quality as Colgate should be. In other words, you're buying Coca-Cola. If you go and ask, give me Coca-Cola, they're supposed to give you the drink as Coca-Cola's quality should be. So when you're buying something of brand name, caveat emptor does not stand. If you're buying goods sold by description, you come and you describe to the guy, I want a bottle that looks like this. Actually, this is sample, sell by sample number 6. You come and say, I want a bottle that looks like this. Give me 3 bottles like this. That is sell by sample. The law says that they are supposed to give you the same quality as this bottle. In other words, they are not supposed to deviate from the quality, saying, oh, you should be aware and inspect. No. Because you provided a sample, that's number 6. Number 5, sell by description. You have described what you want. You say that I want a Rolls Royce that is blue in color of the 1930 make. That is a description. They cannot go back and give you something different and they say, oh, you're supposed to be where. No, you described exactly what you wanted and you're supposed to get what you wanted by description. So caveat emptor doesn't apply with respect to description, where you have described what you want. The seller is bound to give you exactly as you have described it. You don't need to inspect or to look or to search. You're supposed to get what you have described. Number 7, here we're talking about sell by sample and description. Here we're saying you provide a sample. So you say, I want a bottle like this, but I want it in color blue. I mean color red. The description is the color. The sample is the bottle. So I provide for you the bottle and say, give me a bottle like this, but I want it in color red and another one in color white. That is a sell by sample and description. I have actually made a video on conditions and warranties and what the law says. You can look through my videos, you'll find it. So the law says that this sell by sample number 7 is that if I give you a sample and I describe what I want, you cannot wake up and say caveat emptor that I'm supposed to be where, I'm supposed to inspect the goods and all that. No, I already told you what I want. It is clear. The law says I'll be protected, and caveat emptor will not protect the seller. Number 8, here we're talking about usage of trade. In other words, that trade practice is done a certain way. If, for example, the way we import things from China is I send money by telegraphic transfer to a an account, a bank account, and they sell me goods. And the goods come by ship and in a certain way. The law says that I'm not supposed to go beyond what the usage is to inspect. If it's a certain way things are done for that kind of trade, the law doesn't expect me to inspect. I'm supposed to trust the process of usage of trade, the way that trade happens. I'm supposed to trust that process. I don't have to look behind and search and inspect to make sure that I get good quality goods. So usage of trade is another exception to caveat emptor. The seller will not be protected if they don't follow the usage of trade and they give me a defective good. I'm supposed to bank on the seller that this is how things are done. This is how we've been doing it for the last 20 years, so I don't need to inspect. I order the book from here, it is sent to me. I don't need to inspect it because the usage of trade says you order by a click and it is sent to you and it is expected to be of good quality. Number 9, here we're talking about fraud or misrepresentation. If the seller is involved in any fraud, or misrepresentation, they tell lies, the law will not protect them with caveat emptor because the law does not uphold illegalities. Once there is an illegality or a fraud, chances are you will not be protected as a seller with caveat emptor because you defraud someone. The law cannot support you to defraud another, no. So that is their last exception to caveat emptor that I'm presenting to you today. So we also have caveat vendita, which is the opposite of caveat emptor. Caveat vendita is telling the vendor or the seller to beware. What are they supposed to be aware of? They're supposed to be aware of the fact that there are some implied conditions that they have to be alert not to break. Then also sometimes they have to be aware that the person they're selling for has provided all the information that they need. So the seller from which they are getting the goods is accountable to give them all the information on the goods they are selling. So those are just some of the examples of caveat vendita. So this imposes a greater responsibility on the seller to fight for themselves or to look out for themselves because they're supposed to be aware of what they are selling. However, this is not as common as caveat emptor. Caveat emptor is the most common one, but this one also exists and I just wanted to bring it to your attention. So that is it on caveat emptor today. I hope it is now clearer, you understand it better. If you want me to discuss any legal aspect of any laws on business laws or any other laws really, do not hesitate to ask. Put a comment, I will read it and I will make a video for you. Like I said, one person's request is sufficient for me. If I can change one life, it is all worth it for me. So do not hesitate to ask anything you want me to talk about in the videos. I'll make a video for you and I'll keep it as simple as possible because these videos are mainly made for my business students who are basically not lawyers, but they just want to understand the principles because they do the legal subject in their programs, in their academic programs. So I hope you have a good day. Thank you for watching.